Today, we're diving deep into one of the most infamous drug empires in the UK, an underworld story of money, betrayal, and power. This is the tale of Dawood Aslam, better known as D, the drug baron of BD3 whose empire was worth millions. By his early 20s, D had built an empire that seemed untouchable. Moving over 200 kilos of drugs every week, his wealth skyrocketed to an estimated £10 million. But as history has shown time and time again, the bigger the empire, the harder the fall. At the heart of this story is another name, Khalid Mahmood, or as the streets of Bradford knew him, Holler. A close friend turned bitter rival. Holler's betrayal would set off a chain of events that led to one of the biggest drug busts in Bradford. This is a real-life crime story of deception, smuggling, and a staggering £9 million heroin operation that landed Holler and his crew a total of 109 years in prison. D was more than just a dealer. He was a businessman. His operation ran like a corporation, with street dealers working under him, loyal enforcers keeping order, and major suppliers ensuring a constant flow of product. The scale of his operation was staggering. While most street dealers sold in grams, D dealt in bricks, 200 every single week. This wasn't small-time dealing. With millions of pounds flowing through his empire, D lived a life of excess. Luxury cars, designer clothes, and high-stakes connections. In the criminal underworld of Bradford, he was untouchable. Holler, another heavyweight in Bradford's drug trade. He wasn't just a business partner to D, he was a trusted friend, a man who had risen through the ranks alongside him. But in the world of crime, loyalty is rare. Greed always wins. At some point, Holler made a move that changed everything. He stole £1 million worth of drugs from D's supply. While D was still running his empire, Holler was already under police surveillance. Holler wasn't just a street dealer. He was running an international smuggling ring, moving millions of pounds worth of heroin between Pakistan and the UK. His operation was clever. The drugs were hidden inside baby powder bottles, sent through Royal Mail's track service from Bradford to Pakistan. Once there, his accomplices would swap out the powder and replace it with high-grade heroin, repackaging the bottles and marking them as return to sender. This meant that when the parcels landed back in the UK, they would be sent directly to addresses in Hull and Manchester, avoiding the usual customs checks. It was a sophisticated and highly profitable operation until one mistake exposed everything. By 2011, Royal Mail staff in Hull noticed something suspicious. Too many of these return-to-sender packages were arriving at the same depot. When they opened 5 of them, they discovered a total of 10 kilograms of heroin, worth nearly £500,000. This was just the tip of the iceberg. Records showed that at least 94 other parcels had already been successfully delivered. If each contained the same amount, that meant a total shipment of £9 million worth of heroin had already made it to the UK. With this discovery, the investigation began. Over the next 2 years, police and customs officials tracked the entire operation. By September 2013, they had everything they needed. Raids were carried out across Bradford, Hull, and Manchester, resulting in the mass arrests of Holler and his crew. After a 10-week trial, the jury found them guilty of conspiracy to import Class A drugs, conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, conspiracy to launder the proceeds of crime. The total sentences? 109 years in prison. Khalid Mahmood, Holler then aged 30, was jailed for 25 years. He was the ringleader of this operation. Holler was jailed for 51 months in 2002 for his part in the Bradford riots and received 4 years in June 2008 for involvement with a firearm. Holler's right-hand man, Faisal Khan of Marshfields, Bradford, was jailed for 21 years after the judge described him as Holler's trusted ally, having made at least 2 trips to Pakistan. Fiaz Ahmed of Oldham was jailed for 23 years after he was described as playing a leading role in the operation. dealing with the heroin once it arrived in the UK. Yasser Uddin of Manningham was a postman and trusted friend of Holler, who used his knowledge of the Royal Mail system to keep tabs on the packages. He was jailed for 21 years. Usman Bari of Middleton Court, Hull, was jailed for 19 years. The judge said he had been the eyes and ears at the Hull end of the operation. All 5 were found guilty by the jury of conspiracy to import Class A drugs, conspiracy to supply and conspiracy to launder the proceeds. He wasn't just any dealer. He was a respected name on the streets. D had built a formidable reputation in Bradford's Underworld, instilling fear in the hearts of many gangsters who dared to cross his path as he carried himself with an air of dominance that left no room for doubt about his authority. It wasn't just his actions that commanded respect. It was the way he presented himself. Gangsters in Bradford weren't just wary of him. They feared him, knowing that challenging his authority could come with serious consequences. Dawood had many authorities over people such as Akil Khan. Akil was a businessman who used profits from laundering millions of pounds for criminals and conned financial institutions to fund a property portfolio and buy a fleet of luxury sports cars, was jailed for 6 years in 2014. Akil Khan acted as a go-to man for criminals across the north of England and was jailed at Leeds Crown Court today after admitting money laundering, possessing a forged bank document and contempt of court. The National Crime Agency, Akil Khan from Bradford, used cash from money laundering and defrauding financial institutions to fund his property investments, including the old bus depot, a well-known Bradford landmark, which he bought for £2.5 million in 2011. In total, Akil Khan's network had £10 million of property assets, the agency said. The money used to buy the properties had been laundered through multiple bank accounts to try and conceal its source. Akil Khan and his employee Mohammed Zulkarnain used insurance brokers as fronts for their criminal enterprise, obtaining finance from legitimate financial institutions for non-existent or vastly inflated insurance policies. The money was then used to buy property and to fund Akil Khan's in a life of luxury, the NCA said. Police seized a fleet of his cars, which including a Lamborghini, an Aston Martin, and a Range Rover. Mohammed Zulkarnain admitted money laundering and fraud and was sentenced to 2.5 years jail. He was sentenced along with 2 other men who were also from Bradford. Akil Khan's brother, Atika Anwar Khan, who controlled and coordinated the distribution of cash into third-party bank accounts, was given a 6-month suspended prison sentence. Another associate, Ajib Khan, who was previously convicted of supplying Class A drugs, also admitted laundering money into property. He was given a 2-year suspended sentence. The NCA said almost £100,000 of cash contaminated with drugs was seized from Ajib's home. Akil Khan had presented himself as a successful and wealthy businessman, when in reality he was the head of a large-scale, sophisticated money laundering operation. One of Dee's closest associates was a man named Meggy Khan, a notorious gangster whose name struck fear into the hearts of many. Unlike Dee, who operated with strategy and financial intelligence, Meggy was known for something else: violence. His reputation for brutality made him one of the most feared men in Bradford's Underworld. But in 2019, Meggy's time ran out. He was jailed for life for murder, marking the end of an era in Bradford. Dee's extended family, including close cousins, had many other gangsters under their control, such as Noddy and Hanny. Their influence was undeniable. Dee's cousins and family in particular were feared figures on the streets, known for their ruthlessness and ability to make or break gangsters. They weren't just involved in the trade, they set the stage for others to thrive in it. Many of the names that later became known in Bradford's criminal world owed their success to Dee's family, who gave them their first opportunities in the game. Whether it was through drug supply, protection, or sheer reputation, Dee's families played a crucial role in shaping the city's underworld. For years, Dee and his crew moved like ghosts, avoiding law enforcement and controlling the streets with an iron grip. But in 2013, that all changed. A single raid would mark the beginning of the end for one of Bradford's most notorious criminal enterprises. It was February 12th, 2013. At first glance, the flat in Lister Court, Cunliffe Road, Manningham, seemed ordinary. But behind its doors, something much darker was unfolding. Police had been watching the location for weeks, using hidden surveillance cameras and tracking mobile phone activity. They knew something big was going on, and on that night, they had decided to strike. When officers stormed the flat, they uncovered a staggering haul: 30 kilograms of heroin in varying levels of purity, 78 grams of cocaine, 116,000 pounds worth of crack cocaine. It was one of the largest drug seizures in West Yorkshire's history. The sheer quantity of heroin alone was enough to flood the streets of Bradford for months. But the drugs weren't the only thing that interested the police. They also found a list, a detailed record of drug dealers and suppliers, a crucial piece of evidence that tied everything together. Inside the flat that night, officers arrested 4 key members of the gang: Dawood Aslam, Mohammed Ahmed, Humayun Nawaz, and Samir Ali. It was a coordinated takedown, but the operation didn't stop there. Over the next few days, police tracked down and arrested the rest of the crew. Dee's operation wasn't just about selling drugs. It was a well-structured network. Each member played a specific role. Dawood Aslam, the mastermind, the man pulling the strings from the top. Mohammed Azam Yaqub, one of Dee's closest associates handling distribution. Humayun Nawaz, in charge of logistics and safe houses. Jamal Maroof, trusted enforcer, making sure the operation ran smoothly. Samir Ali, another key distributor. Mohammed Khan, the courier responsible for moving shipments across cities. Their movements were tracked between Bradford, Harrogate, Barnsley, and Manchester, creating a vast supply chain. They were careful, but not careful enough. Police had been watching them since January the 29th, 2013, documenting their meetings, their phone calls, even their shopping trips. Investigators noted their purchases of food mixers, equipment commonly used to cut and mix heroin before distribution. The gang's downfall wasn't just a lucky break for law enforcement, it was a patient, calculated operation. And once the hammer dropped, there was no escaping the consequences. When the gang finally stood before the judge, the verdict was inevitable. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judge made sure they paid the price for their crimes. In September 2014, the sentences were handed down. Dawood Aslam, 17 years, Mohammed Azam Yaqub, 9 years, 4 months, Humayun Nawaz, 9 years, 4 months, Jamal Maroof, 9 years, Samir Ali, 7 years, 3 months, Mohammed Khan, 8 years, 7 months. But there was still one man left to face justice. Dee's own brother, Masood Aslam, also known as Max. Max had already served time before. Back in 2009, police had found a handgun at his property, landing him behind bars. But even after that, he was pulled back into the game. When the drug empire collapsed, he became the final piece of the puzzle. His sentence, 10 years. But unlike his brother, Max eventually made a different choice. He used his time behind bars to reflect, and when he walked free, he left the criminal world behind. Even after his sentencing, the authorities weren't done with D. In September 2015, he was hit with a confiscation order of £500,000, a small fraction of the wealth he had accumulated, but a heavy blow nonetheless. The order included several properties in Bradford, 2 high-value watches, £147,000 in a bank account. It was the final financial reckoning for a man who had once controlled a multi-million-pound empire. Years passed, and then Dawood Aslam walked free. But unlike most ex-criminals, he didn't return to the shadows. He didn't try to rebuild his old empire. Instead, he made a bold move. He went legit. Through strategic investments and business ventures, D successfully transitioned from a drug kingpin to a respected entrepreneur. Today, his business empire is thriving. He lives a lavish but legitimate lifestyle, far removed from his past. This is SN Studios. Like, share, and subscribe.